Hey, I'm excited to help you sprint faster with this video covering resistance speed training and how it helps you sprint and run faster as an athlete. All right, so there is a timestamp down below, so if you need to navigate the video a little bit more quickly and have specific things you want to get to, you can hop straight to them. But I'd encourage you to watch the whole thing so that way you get a greater understanding so you can sprint faster, okay? So hit that like, hit that subscribe. This video has been beneficial for you because it helps the trend out tremendously, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
This is exactly what this video is going to be about. It's going to help you sprint faster, run faster, and be more explosive, okay? So we are going to dive into what some research says, number one, as to what research says on how to develop speed, all right? We're going to talk about an sample workout for you. We are going to have real-life examples of what we do here coaching in our gym. So again, real quick, I'm Josh from Athletic Preparation here in Auburn Hills. And again, we're going to dive into helping you sprint faster. So real quick, this information is taken from coaches, books, seminars we've attended, guys like Charlie Francis, Joe DeFranco, Max Shamarzo on Instagram, Ken Clark, all these different research guys. So we just want to share it with you so we're not trying to act like it's our own. We just simply apply it with our athletes in our gym, and now we want to help you. So I just have to preface that out there. So shout out to those guys. So real quick, when you are doing your speed training, okay, we think of things on a continuum. So meaning we have high force on one side and high speed on the other. So they are opposing, right? If we have to push a car, then you're going to go really slow, right? Your force is going to be high, but you're going to move very slow. And same thing vice versa. If you are running in the wind's going to carry you and you're going to move fast and you're going to be unresisted because all you have to do is carry your body weight or push your body weight, okay? So everything has different qualities that we're going to dive into right here really quick. So high force exercises. So these are things like doing a heavy sled push or a heavy sled sprint. So this is something where you load up to 70 to 120% of your body weight, as you can see right here. So if you weigh 200 pounds, it's roughly what, 140 pounds is 70% of your body weight, up to over maybe say 220 pounds of your body weight. So like if you were sprinting, you'd have that much weight on the sled pushing it or pulling it, okay? And we'll dive into what that means in 2 seconds. Power here is in the middle, is kind of the sweet spot, so roughly 30 to 60% of your body weight. And high speed is basically doing no resisted sprinting, so just sprinting period, or a very, very light sled, like 10% of your body weight, like we'll talk about. So let's get into the research really quick, what it says, because there used to be some research that said you should not go beyond 10% of your body weight when you're doing resisted sprinting because it'll alter your mechanics, you'll create bad habits, and it's going to be detrimental to your speed and actually slow you down, all right? So, but lately, some research from like J.B. Morin, who's a great, I think he's French scientist, so I apologize, or researcher, and he did some research where they had team sport athletes, again, do heavy resisted speed training, like I'll put the link down below, but as you can see right here, there's a very heavy sled sprinting group that went up to 80% of their body weight, okay? And then they compared the sled sprint group versus the non-sled sprint group, and essentially the heavy resisted sprinters improved their speed, okay? And more specifically over the 5 meter mark, so that first burst of acceleration, which I know a lot of team sport athletes want, okay? So this is it. Again, I'll link it down below. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but just to know that this heavy resisted speed training works, okay? Whether you're pushing or pulling a sled, all right? So what phase this will improve for you? So if you're high force, if we're doing the high force of this type of load, that's going to help you during your start or your acceleration, all right? So very, very specific. Same thing if you're doing power, so lighter loads, trying to increase your rate of force development, but again, that's more going to be specific because the load is pretty high, so meaning that's going to help you with your acceleration again in your starts. And then if you were to say, let's say you were going to take your heavy sled sprints and you're going to run over, say like 50-yard sprints with that, that's not going to really be beneficial for you because it's such a long distance. You're going to get tired. There's so much load that you have to do. It just becomes more of a conditioning exercise as opposed to speed training. And we are here to get faster because you want to sprint faster, right? We're not trying to make you tired right now. So we save the very light sleds as an example here during the max velocity phase. So stuff, 10 to 60 yards, which is exactly what we're going on to right here. So which distances should you do if you're doing heavy resisted speed training? So if you're doing a sled push or a heavy sled sprint, so just a quick example so you guys know what we're talking about. Let's see what we got right here. So if we're doing a heavy sled sprint or a heavy sled push as an example, so as you can see, there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plates on here, so maybe 300 pounds. He's going fast as he can, right? He's having maximal intent while he's sprinting, but as you can tell, he's not going anywhere fast, all right? So this would be example over here of our high force type of sprinting, all right? So we're sprinting with high force going against a high load. All right, now contrast that with something along the lines of, all right, so now let's say like Griff here.
All right, right.
All right, so now as you can see, he only has like 3 plates on here roughly. So the load has gone down, so this might be more of a power type of oriented sprint. So meaning he's still going pretty fast. He has, you know, decent mechanics, but again, he's just focused on moving that weight as fast as he can and going from there. So this, again, as an example, is talking about how, all right, so the high force one was the first one that you've seen. The power one was to be the second one. So a little bit lighter load, as we talked about here. So it's going to train a different quality. And again, we're going to go over examples of those in a second. And then something like high speed, again, will just be like doing a regular sprint we talked about, doing some competition, things like that. Something to consider now as well is sled pulling versus sled pushing. All right, so sled pulling is meaning you're pulling it behind you. You're doing a sprint with the sled simply behind you. As you can tell, these are pretty decent loads, probably more of a power type of day with like that 30 to 60% of their body weight that we just talked about. So again, just sprinting, pulling the sled. Typically, you can do higher sprints like that, but there's pros and cons to each versus if you were doing the sled pushing with the super heavy sled that we talked about here 2 seconds ago. This one, yep, Luke. So sled pushing. So the difference between sled pulling and pushing really quick. So here, obviously you can't use your arms when you're sprinting. You're gonna feel a lot more in your core because you're kind of creating that co-contraction of pushing against a heavy object. So those are the main differences like that. Some people will go against the sled. We've had great results with it, honestly. So I mean, people can bash it, but you know, it's got some results. It's very simple. It's quick and easy for kids to learn. And then again, you know, the sled pushing, like we talked about. So just teaching kids, athletes to get in an angle and drive and see what it feels like to push. Very easy for them to learn. And don't forget to flex with the camera. Now compare that when the guys are doing sled pulling. The weight, number one, is attached at their hips. So it's going to challenge them from their posture and teach them how to project a little bit since we have that there. Also, they're going to be able to use their arms when they sprint. So meaning when they go to take off, they have the freedom to use their arms. But again, like this is going to challenge your posture. You can see he's really hunched over. We definitely don't want that. You can tell he's sacrificing his posture. So again, this just gives you feedback as a coach and an athlete on things that the athlete needs to improve on because he's trying to go forward so fast and stay low. And then he naturally rises. But anyways, the resisted sled sprinting, again, this just has different things versus different phases. We'll say that this is a little bit more specific, we'll say, since they can have the freedom to use their arms and libs while they're sprinting compared to like the sled push, right? So that talks a little bit about the first two of doing high force and power types of sprints, all right? So mainly the difference is the load, all right? So some different examples of exercises for those different options for you. Sled push, sled sprint, heavy band marches. So again, stuff like that we have here with these guys. So the heavy band march, again, just teaches the athletes mechanics. We want to resist them very heavily, meaning make them do the work and apply force back, aka apply high force that we talked about. Obviously, it's only a band, so they can move pretty well through it. But again, just that heavy band marches, that's going to help you develop force. And then in this situation, we've turned it into a run. But those are just different ways to incorporate high force work into your sprinting, so that way you can run and sprint faster. So another versions is heavy band sprint. So we can do sprints against a heavy band. We can do hill sprints up a steeper hill. So those are some ways to develop high force for sprinting faster. Now moving on to power. Power is basically the very similar exercises, okay? And then again, stuff like this we get from guys like Max Shamarzo. So as an example right here, this is like force velocity, just changing the force velocity curve. So this is a great example from him. So he has the same exact exercise. One's a heavy deadlift, two's the same thing, a deadlift just from pins, and then a jump with that, with the same exact tool and implement, okay? So what's the difference? The load. He has high force here, moderate force here, and then he has a very light load there. And so what's different? This one moves very slow. This one moves, you know, kind of in the in-between range. And this one is obviously explosive, all right? So it's not that you should stay at one or the other, it's just what you're trying to develop as an athlete. What do you need? Do you need force? Do you need velocity? Do you need power? The answer is you really need them all. But this is just a great representation from him on how to implement that. And then now we're talking about this force velocity profiling into your sprint. All right, so like we just talked about, exercises vary the same, but what varied? Instead of a heavy band here, we're going to be doing a medium band. All right, so we're lightening the resistance, and that causes the speed to go up. So now we're kind of in the in-between power zone. All right, so hill sprints now, this is a shout out to Ultimate Athlete. So if you do want to develop the optimal sprinting, you don't want to go beyond an 8% incline for your sprints, okay? For uphill sprinting. So now, going off of those two, now we're going to go into the high speed phase. So this is where you might do an unloaded sled push, meaning like absolutely zero weight on the sled. You can do a sled sprint again with nothing or maybe 10 pounds on it. Light band sprint, so sprint against a very light band, like almost like, again, like there's no resistance. And then bounding, so again, you just have your body weight when you're bounding. You can do some acceleration bounds. I don't think we have a video of that pulled up, but again, as you can imagine, just doing bounds. So those are different ways on how to develop high speed as an athlete, and we're going to talk about how to take these, put them into a program, and how you should progress them leading up to your season. All right, so what are the different qualities that this trains for you? So if you are doing high force, it's not that one is better than the other. It's just what you need and what you're trying to get out of you as an athlete. Okay, so a lot of times we spend in the off season, kids right here. It also depends on your athlete. Typically youth athletes will do better with high force stuff, right? The more advanced you become as an athlete, so if you're like beyond, like in college or beyond college, and depends how good you are, a lot of times like this part is fine for you, and you really need to focus a lot more on the speed oriented part. Okay, so again, it's just a continuum of what someone needs. So anyways, the high force, this is going to develop specific strength. It's going to increase your rate of force development a little bit. It's very easy to learn, so I love doing it because the drill does the teaching for you, and then you can just do it versus trying to be confused and thinking about, am I doing it right? And then you start thinking, and then you slow down. So resistance sprints are really great in order to improve your speed. All right. The downfall, again, here in the red, is you're going to have a longer ground contact time. So meaning your foot's going to be in the ground for a longer time. But again, we already know that, so a smart coach just works around that. Okay, if it's not really a big issue. So meaning I wouldn't do tons of heavy resistance sprints or a bunch of heavy resisted sled sprints before, let's say, right like the week before the season, or a month, or the month or the program before your season starts, because we know that it's going to take a longer ground contact time, and we don't want to send that signal to your body to spend a lot of time on the ground. We want it to be on and off, right? So that's just where intelligent programming comes in, which is a whole other video that we'll get to. So what are some of the effects of the power training? So again, your foot's going to be a little bit longer on the ground compared to actual sprinting, of course, because again, you have resistance. It's still easier to learn. It's going to increase the challenge with the power because again, we're taking some of the resistance away, so you can't lean on it as an athlete. You can't lean on the weight, and the weight's not going to pick you up. So now you have to kind of initiate and get your leg cycles through a little bit faster. You have to spend more time or less time on the ground and less time for you to think about it, and then more like you just have to be an athlete and power through. So meaning it's still easier to learn because you have some resistance. Your, again, rate of force development is going to go up compared to the last stuff of high force, and again, it's going to develop power and strength for you. With the high speed stuff, so again, this is just basically pure sprinting. So you're going to have the shortest ground contact time, obviously. It's going to be the most specific, so meaning because you're going to get going into your sport, this would be the most specific work you can do to improve your speeds. Just straight up sprinting, it is great. And then something that's it's hard for athletes to do, though, is to gauge their intensity. A lot of times if I tell athletes, hey, go run 90%, then they don't really know what 90% is. So it's very hard for them to conceptualize it if they've never experienced it. So also they don't get any feedback from a band or from an object of like trying to go there faster. So sometimes it's just hard to learn if I just say, hey, go sprint. Like a lot of times having this resistance for them gives them something to, I guess, focus on or again, unload them with their body weight. So this are things that we've found in order to help them sprint faster, all right? And like we talked about earlier, some coaches that we've learned on is from guys like Joe DeFranco here. So real quick, this was a great seminar that I attended actually. So he's talking about, he had a very small gym, so kind of like I do. So when he started out, so he only had like 10 to 15 yards to do sprints. So he did these prowler sprints, so prowler, sled, whatever you want to call it. This thing right here, And so this was when it was first coming out, maybe 2 decades ago. Anyways, he would have guys run with them, not really knowing it because it was a new tool. And then but this became a monumental thing he did to help lower sprint times and combine guys and all of his athletes in high school and stuff like that. So again, this was just him talking about it. And I just want to showcase these results really quick.
At 25, you couldn't push. What the hell? And he was like, dude, you don't f***ing understand. Like, I can't move my f***ing legs. It's never going to get better. I'm never going to be able to bend my legs. So
real quick, hey, that's me right there at the seminar. Yep, short hair and everything. Fun fact.
We talked him out of it. He was eventually able to walk again. We need to help our athletes out of there. What do we need to help our athletes get better?
So as you can see really quick, you can kind of zoom in on these results over here. So these are some of his guys that he trained, and he just wants to highlight their befores. So like 163 and versus their after. Okay, so I can't see the athlete's name up there, but it took 5.5 steps, took 1.63 average. But this is athlete number 1. Before he was running a 177, after he was running a 162. This one running a 164. Now after training with Joe, a 152. So in this talk he talked about his primary methods of sprinting, again, because they had a short space and they're in the winter, so you can't go outside. Also, they had to do a lot of prowler sprints or heavy resisted sprints. And so these are some of the results that it achieved. So again, especially if you're a team sport athlete, you're trying to, acceleration is the name of the game. So then this is a great method to develop speed is with resisted sprints. So again, just shout out to him really quick. Now, as an athlete, and very specifically team sport athletes, acceleration is the name of the game. How fast, and how hard you can go from 0 to 5, right? It also helps with change of direction, but as you can see here, there's a very recent research study that talked about very heavy, again, resisted speed training. So what they did, there's 50 different high school athletes, team sport athletes. I believe it was lacrosse and like rugby, I think. Anyways, what they did is 50 athletes, they were assigned unresisted, so just regular sprints, light resistance, moderate and heavy. They talk about the what they did to monitor the slowness or the load. So instead of adding load and body weight like we just talked about, they actually measured their maximal speed, and they prescribed a load that would reduce their speed to a certain percentage. So this one, as an example, they were 25% velocity decrement, so meaning they slowed them down 25%. These people, they'd slow down 50%. These people, they'd slow down 75%. As you can see, the different results, the split times between the 5 to 20 meters improved across all resisted groups, but did not improve with the unresisted sprinting. So meaning the very heavy sled sprint group, they had the best results, all right? And again, more specifically, like we talked about earlier, over the shorter distances, the 5, the 10, the 20, all right? Going beyond that and doing very heavy resistance would not be very beneficial as an athlete, all right? The unresisted group improved, as you can see, the most here during the higher end speeds, right? It didn't help at all during the 5, the green one. It didn't really help at all from the 0 to 5, but it did improve the most during the longer distance, as we would kind of assume with correlating along with the research. The last part now, coming back to more resisted sprint training and research, is again this one from J.B. Morin. So the effects of very heavy sled training on improving horizontal force output in soccer players. So this was the results right here. Just kind of jump into the conclusions really quick for you. So as you can see, their force went up, their power went up, their rate of force development went up. These black lines was the heavy sled group, these little black dots, as you can see. The control group was the unresisted group, so went up marginally their force and their power. But the most impact that, again, the very heavy sled had was on the 5 meter group. You can see right here. We'll get our marker just in case. So this 5 meter group right here had the biggest impact, especially compared to the heavy sled group versus the control group, as well as the 20 meter group. As you can see, going beyond that 20 meters, like the gap is less of a difference, and here it's a greater difference. So again, the heaviest sled sprints has the greatest correlation to acceleration. It should be redundant by now, but that's what research is showing now. So this is stuff that great coaches were doing maybe 10, 20 years ago that now research is just kind of becoming very popular and validating it, right? So as a coach, it's a little bit of an art and a science, right? So you need to go off your intuition, but you also have to understand the research and what it does, but then you can be creative, take that information, and think about how you can apply it real world practically, okay? So let's go over some workouts for you and some practical stuff on how for you to apply this. if you do not have a resisted sled, or if you don't have a sled to do resisted sprints, again, you can do hill sprints, you can do wind resisted sprints, like running into the wind's resisting you. You can do an Exergenie, which are a great resistance tool. It's very easy to vary the load on those. Super great tool to use, especially if you're in a short distance. Plus it's way easier than loading the weights around and carrying the weights onto a sled. Just the Exergenie hooks up, super nice, super convenient. Couldn't recommend that enough. So now let's give you a simple workout. Oh, and the last thing too, if you don't have a sled, then you can also just put some plates on the floor. So again, you can put like 245s on each side, or 245s on a towel. You can run those across the gym floor. Anything to add resistance from that horizontal type of force vector, okay? So we'll talk about force vectors real quick. Let's go back to Schmarzo, Max, over here. So this is the importance of force vectors. And force vector is basically just in which direction you're going to apply the force before we get to these workouts for you. We have more of a horizontal orientation of this force, which is going to correlate a little bit better to your acceleration compared to a vertical force, as he describes right here so perfectly with his Instagram. So again, go follow him. Seriously, tremendous, super smart guy. So this is applying force horizontally. Where do you think this would help out more? Probably with the acceleration phase. And also, what quality do you think that he's training? Power. Look how fast he's moving this, right? He's going for power in that direction. All right, here, same thing. I'd say it's another power exercise with these trap bar shrugs, and then he's going for vertical, right? So again, this is just a great example. He just overlaid the arrows. Great job. Thank you so much for doing that. And I appreciate you being in the video. So now let's give you a sample workout really quick of what that would look like. So let's go over a high force workout for you guys. Something you can take home and do. So before you do that, make sure you hit that like for me. It helps out tremendously on the channel, and grateful for you here. Hopefully you're learning something. And there's also speed workouts in our store, so you can hop online, go grab a workout if you need a speed training program to get faster. Right? We have specific ones. So example workout. So let's say number one right here. Let's say we start off with some push-up sprints after a full warm-up, of course. So let's say we do 6 sets of 10 push-up sprints. So just start from a push-up. Part number 2, now let's go to band resisted sprints. Again, since it's a high force day, let's say you do very heavy resisted band sprints. So, 6 out of 5 yards, just getting 5 yards as fast as you can. And then lastly is going back to that same push-up sprint. So now that we kind of applied that resistance, so first I always like doing free sprints first, just because I believe in keeping it in the program. So we'll never do strictly resisted speed training. I always like adding the element of just pure sprinting. That's just my personal bias, okay? And then also we've got great results with that. And then also the push-up sprint, coming back to that now. So we did a push-up sprint, we did some resisted sprints, and now we're coming back to that push-up sprint. So the idea there is that the resistance kind of potentiates, so now we can try to apply a little bit more force aggressively in that direction, like going against the band from the push-up sprints again without having too much variety. So let's say this whole workout we did 130 total yards of actual volume. So that's something that we skipped over a little bit earlier. So the total volume of a session. So just kind of rough guidelines for recommendation. So let's say one session would last, like how much work do I do? How many sets, how many reps? So basically, as long as we do about 100 to 160 yards of work, okay? Power might be here, 120 to 180. High speed, meaning 180 to up to 400 yards of just straight up, sprinting work. So however many sets and reps you want to break that down to, it's totally fine. But those are just some rough guidelines. So now let's say we're doing a power day. So let's say exercise number 1, we do falling starts. So meaning we start up nice and tall, again, unresisted, fall, go right into a sprint. After that, we'll go power skips for distance against a band. So again, having someone resist you and just doing power skips over 20 yards. And then lastly is skip and start. So we kind of combine the skips into the falling starts. So we try to make things blend well. We call it speed layering. We want to layer the qualities of the speed that we're trying to train, okay? And make it easier to transfer all the stuff that we've been doing into the sprint where we want it. So then we can do skip and starts, 4 sets of 20 yards. So again, how much volume we did for the day, to roughly 180 total yards of sprinting volume. And then the last one, so let's say this is just a pure speed day, like max velocity type of sprint day where you're upright running. So this is going to be, let's say we have a superset here. So meaning we're going to do a sled sprint, again, I would say maybe 10 pounds or that 10% or less of your body weight. So you do 5 sets, or you do a set of 20. So do one sprint of 20 yards, unhook the sled. You can walk back, rest 2 minutes, and then go right into your just regular sprint of 40 yards, okay? So I do a resisted sprint, rest, come to my unresisted sprint. Again, same idea as trying to potentiate that. This is just one way of doing it. There's 1,000 ways you can add that into your training program. But again, this was just one way, a sample of one workout we've done before to kind of in this situation going 40 yards. Probably some football guys trying to improve their 40. So anyways, that's how much total work you did for the day, 300 yards if you did these 5 sets of 20 with 5 sets of 40 yards. So anyways, again, hit that like for me. If you have a specific question, what do you think about resisted speed training? Have you found that to help you during your speed training? Have you seen improvement doing resisted speed training? Do you think you should go heavy resisted speed training? Do you think you should not do any resistance at all? So I'm kind of curious. What do you guys think? Comment down below. But anyways, hit that like, hit that subscribe, and if you haven't done so yet, grab your free athlete training template down below. We'll walk you through how to use it.